This is the Jack Murphy Podcast. Here's your host, Jack Murphy.
See, this is the first time I've spoken to this man in 38 years. Not because I don't like him. I had Claire Stevens on from Z100 a few weeks ago, and she said, you know who would be a great guest on the podcast would be Jerry Lembo. And I said, you're right, he would be. And Claire said, oh, if you do have him on, be sure to let me know. And I reached out to her Monday, and of course, you know, Claire, you can't hide money, Jerry. She's gone away for the winter.
Oh.
She's unavailable down in Boca or somewhere.
Yeah, I thought I saw she was on a cruise with the family, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's away until I think mid-January. So just you and I today, but that's fine. So Jerry is, for you people that are just watching the podcast and don't know what it is, was a record promoter for a long time for one of the good labels, CBS, and handled a lot of the major artists. And I was lucky enough to work a couple of years at the top 40 station in America, Z100. And Jerry would bring all the artists up to the station.
I was working for Columbia Records. From about 86 to 97. Prior to that, I was at Chrysalis Records for a couple of years. And that was the Huey Lewis, Billy Idol, Pat Benatar years.
You seem to hit the record companies right when the big artists are coming along.
I followed the platinum road, so to speak.
Chrysalis was a great label as well. When you were at CBS, who were some of the other people that worked there? Because there were a bunch of guys that I met when I was just a little baby DJ in the industry coming out of Atlanta that went to Columbia, and a lot of them came to New York. Who were some of the people you worked with?
Locally, it was Jim Del Bazzo, Rocky, as he was called, Ray Free. When I got there, Al Tello was the president, and then when he left, Tommy Mottola.
I remember that
Tommy
name.
Mottola came in and to run Sony.
Everybody remembers that name.
And then Donnie Ienner came over from Arista to become the president at Columbia Records. So
wow.
there was we had it was an all-star team with an all-star roster.
What was the guy's name? Frank DeLeo.
Oh yeah.
Did he work at Columbia?
No, I think Frank was. Well, I remember Frank when he managed Michael Jackson for a brief period of time. And
the first time I ever saw him was in about 1979. I was doing a morning show in Savannah, Georgia, WSGA, and I came out of the studio and came down the stairs, and I thought there were a couple of mobsters in the lobby because, you know, we're in Savannah, Georgia, and everybody's got on shorts and T-shirts, and there were two guys sitting there that had on $10,000 suits if they were a penny and their shined loafers, and they were there pushing a record, and Jerry said, they're record guys, and I went, none of the other ones look like that. It was funny. And then I don't know if you remember him not. He passed away a couple of years ago. My friend John Faggot from Atlanta.
Well, I got a great John Faggot story because I was.
Everybody does.
I was at Chrysalis Records at the time. Now remember, we were distributed by CBS, so
right.
I would go to the branch meetings in Rego Park, Queens, and it was the Chrysalis rep, the Columbia rep, and the Epic rep, and we would fight for priorities, and we really pushed. Back then, when you had physical product, you were really trying to get your records prioritized for retail positioning and things of that nature. Jim Del Bazzo was the Columbia rep at the time. He decided to leave to go to MTV. That opened up the Columbia position in New York. And the branch manager, Ron Piccolo, and the sales manager, Jim Urey, encouraged me to apply for the Columbia job. Now, everybody in the area wanted that job because being a local for Columbia was like being a senior VP at any other label. And
right.
So I said, I only had a couple of years of experience at that point on the label side. I said, what have I got to lose? So I went for the interview, and the senior VP at the time was John Faggett.
How about that?
And I got one of the first interviews, and John said, there's a lot of people want this job, so it's going to be a while. I have to go through the whole process of interviewing everybody. A month went by. I checked in with John. He said, still interviewing. 2 months went by, still interviewing. About 3 months in, the phone rings on a Friday night. I pick it up. It's John. And I said, this must be the courtesy call saying, we appreciated your interest in Columbia, but we've decided to go with X. To my surprise, John said, I want to make you an offer. And I almost fell on the floor.
You're kidding. So he was the person that actually
He
hired
hired me. Yes.
Well, I met John the first night he got into the record business. John used to write for, they were kind of a hippie newspaper in Atlanta called Creative Loafing. And it was one of those papers that they had those free boxes all over town, all over Atlanta. They had and you just open it up and took one. And Creative Loafing covered, the music scene, the hippie scene, and some food. And they had it's kind of like a bad local Rolling Stone, but they had some good writers. And John wrote for, I don't know if you know this, but John was an incredible writer.
I was not aware of that. No.
Well, if you ever got a memo from him, you could sense it just by reading it. But he wrote for them, and then he went to work for Mercury Records. And they had a big Mercury signed a band that I was a big fan of called Whiteface. And they signed him, and they had a big premiere party at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. And John had just been hired as their local person, and I went to the party, and he was sitting by me. And, of course, if you're sitting by him, you weren't going to help but meet him, And it turns out we knew a bunch of the same people, and we became friends for many years. He was a great guy.
Very,
really
very colorful
to
character, great personality. Miss him dearly. But I have to thank him immensely for the opportunity that I was given. It was a great time. He was followed by Mark Benish, who took over when John left. Mark has since passed, and then Bert Baumgartner became the head of promotion, and then after him it was Jerry Blair. So I had worked with 4 different senior VPs during my time at Columbia.
Yeah, the business is rough on people. They don't last long. We're still here, though. Me and you are still here. Well, that kind of eliminates my next question, which was how you got into record promotion. So that you already answered that for us.
Well, it's actually interesting, Jack. I got to tell you, if we back up a minute, I had transitioned from, quote, a real job. I got married very young, and I had 3 children by the time I was 24. Wow. And I wasn't in the business at that time. I had aspired to be, but
what were you doing?
Nothing related to music or entertainment. But because, again, having responsibility, I got this job because it had a salary, it had an expense account, I had benefits, I had a company car, and everybody goes, you made it. You're a success. I hated every minute of it. And I was desperate to try to figure out how was I going to get into the business that represented my authentic self. And I loved music from the time I grew up. I grew up during the Murray Decay era back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to all the Murray Decay shows at the Brooklyn Fox Theater and got to see all those legendary shows, some of the classic artists of the day. And the other irony was that I used to come home from school and watch American Bandstand, Dick Clark, and we had something in common. We both shared a birthday, November 30th. So
me and Dick Clark? Dick Clark once told me that he would see to it that I never worked to get in the industry. I'll tell you that story a little later into the podcast. Okay. Go ahead with your story.
It was a combination of things that it's one of those things where you know where you want to be, you know who you are, but the curriculum was never there. You go to school and they're teaching you history and geography and geometry, and I'm going, I don't get this stuff. I want to be in radio and entertainment, the music business. And I floundered my way through and just kept the dream alive. And the three things were Murray the K shows, Dick Clark, American Bandstand, and the Ed Sullivan Show were the things that I gravitated towards. Uh, 27 years old, married, three kids, and suddenly Saturday Night Fever comes along and disco starts. I see an ad in the local newspaper for a local nightclub that was eliminating live entertainment and hiring disco DJs. I had never mixed records before, but
Mm-hmm.
I figured I can bluff my way through. I go to the audition. They hire two people, John Duncan, who went on to become a popular programmer, mostly on the rock side, and myself part-time. And once I got to do that, where I was mixing records and performing, if you will, in front of a live audience, I was in my glory. This is who I
You were
am.
hooked.
This is
You hooked. It was in
I'm
your
hooked.
blood.
This is what I want to do. So what do you logically do in that situation? Again, when you're married and have three children and those responsibilities, I quit my day job to make $50 a night as an independent contractor at the Windjammer in the Marriott Hotel in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the catalyst. Once that expanded, I grew into that position. I wound up playing full time at night. Again, company car was gone. I had to go out and buy a used car. Had no benefits. I had to go out and get my own hospitalization. Um, and I had my days free. So I drove out to a little radio station in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And the morning guy said, I need a midday guy, and he's going to do it Monday through Friday. You follow me, and you come on Sunday afternoons. Again, no radio experience at that particular time. I brought
But no need for the program director to know that.
I brought a homemade cassette, like and he
Sure.
goes, it's a little rough around the edges. He says, but I can hear the potential, and I really need somebody. And the other aspect of where the label connection came in, because I was playing in the clubs, I was getting record service from all the labels, and this little
Right.
radio station wasn't getting service.
Wasn't. Yeah.
So, by the way, the program director and morning guy was Lou Simon, who you may be familiar with.
I know that name.
He's on Sirius XM right now. He runs the oldies channels. Lou went on.
You're kidding.
He became a major market program director for many years after that.
I guess that's how I know the name.
And Lou hired me, crazy as it seems, and I drove 150 miles a day from my house to the radio station, then to the nightclub, played records all night, slept about 3 hours, repeat.
This almost sounds like my story, really. I had a period of time where I had three jobs, and they were all 80 miles apart. None of them paid any
Minimum
money.
wage,
None of them had any benefits.
No benefits.
There were a couple of them were dangerous in dangerous clubs. I got hit in the head with a bar stool one night, breaking up a fight at the Mad Hatter in Underground Atlanta. So that's a familiar story. It's getting into this business is unbelievably difficult. Can be. Now you don't want to get into this business, but radio end of it anyway. But once you got there, if you really worked at it, you could advance really quickly.
The money still wasn't there, but again, I realized that I finally had become my authentic self. It was kind of in my DNA. And the next process, which answers the question about promotion, I didn't really understand promotion. And it kind of goes back to that story you were telling about the guys in the suits who were kind of getting all the records played. But I had become very well connected to the, again, if you remember, New York before Z100 was mostly dance and R&B. It was WBLS, Frankie Crocker, KTU, Carlos De Jesus, and Paco, and all those guys. And then WRKS, Kiss Radio, Barry Mayo came in to program that station. So it was predominantly dance and R&B. And I was at a Bobby Poe convention, and I met this guy from Tampa who was sitting there, and I heard rumors that he was coming to New York to put on this top 40 station.
I was at that Bobby Poe convention.
Okay, and so you know what I'm talking about.
In fact, hold on a minute.
Okay.
I have something here. Hold on. Well, this one that might have been a later one. Here's a
Bobby Poe Award. There you go. 1980.
Small Market Personality of the Year, 1980 at the Bobby Poe Award.
So the guy I'm sitting down there, I say, I hear you're coming up from Tampa to put this top 40 station on. And it was Scott Shannon. And he was telling me about this concept of this, similar to what he was doing in Tampa at the time. And I said, have you been to New York lately? Do you know what's going on up there? I said, I hope you're going to rent and not buy, because I thought he was going to get his clock cleaned. Well, it didn't take me long. August 3rd, I think it was 1983, when Z100 signed on. And I became a disciple at that point. I just said, holy cow. And it changed the market. And
it had an unbelievable energy, didn't it?
And I realized at that time that I was out promoting dance and R&B records. I said, I got to get some new product in my portfolio here so that I have a reason to go see Scott Shannon at Z100. And I think Michael Ellis was there, and Frankie Blue was an intern at that time. And so I started figuring I had to strategize. How was I going to get pop records? And that's what led to me accepting a job at Chrysalis. So that kind of brings us up to that point, because I said I can't go to Z100 with these disco and R&B records. But we had Huey Lewis, Pat Benatar, Billy Idol, and that gave me entree to Z100.
Sure.
And then ultimately, a few years later, Columbia Records. But when I promoted records, I was I sort of took the position of be the first one there every morning. So I would, as often as possible, go out and get the bagels and the coffee and the orange juice and bring it into. You remember that little kitchen off the outside the studio, and feed the morning show and be able to. Occasionally, Scott would call me in to regale some stories about the artists and stuff like that, and that's how the Z100. It almost became my home away from home.
Well, the 2 years that I was there, I mean, I've probably got 10 pictures, because we always had a professional photographer there when we had an artist come in, and there's probably 10 pictures that you're in with the artist that came by. But who was, I remember one, and the reason I know this, you mentioned it to Claire, was we had Robin Williams there one day. And I don't even know what he was there for. And to be honest with you, when he left, I'm not sure anybody knew what he'd been there for. He came in like a tornado. I'm getting a horrible noise. Can you hear that?
No.
Oh, and now it's gone.
Okay.
All right. He came in like a tornado. There were like 5 people on that show, and it was really, back and forth, high energy. He got there and just took over.
That's Robin.
Just took over. You couldn't, no. All you had to do was here's Robin Williams, and it just took off.
Well,
and for about 20 minutes.
Nonstop.
And then it was over. And we went, okay.
What just happened?
What just happened? And he was hilarious.
Well, Robin had a record called The Night at the Opera that came out on Columbia. So it was my job. I picked him up the night before at LaGuardia Airport, which was hysterical because people recognized who he was. And
at the time, was he on the TV show?
I believe so. And he was also getting ready to do that movie about Vietnam, where he was going to play the DJ.
Good Morning Vietnam.
Yes. So we're at the, and when you're with a celebrity anywhere in public, you want to get in and out of there as quick as possible. So I could hear people behind us whispering, I think that's Robin Williams. That's Robin Williams. Yes. And he would turn around and go, why don't you ask him? He speaks. And then we're waiting for his luggage, and everybody's luggage came but his. Now he gets on the conveyor belt and starts moonwalking on the conveyor belt. I'm going, oh my God. So we left, told him the hotel he was going to be at. If they found his luggage, have it delivered to the hotel. The next day, I scheduled 3 interviews. The first one was Z100. The second one was Howard Stern. The third one was Scott Muni at the Hard Rock. Scott Muni used to do those
WNEW.
Yeah, WNEW. And those were the 3 interviews he did. And it was the same experience that you had, where he walked in, grabbed the mic, and it was his show.
Yeah, for 20 minutes. I mean, I was sitting right next to him, and I only caught about a third of it because he was riffing, it just came in torrents, and it was impossible to keep up with. I have a tape of it somewhere, and I've listened to it several times over the years, and it's just phenomenal.
He was genius. I mean, in the car ride from the airport to the hotel, he would do bits and just go in and out of things that were historical in nature, and he would become the character and state the facts, and then he'd roll the windows down at a stoplight and do a dialogue
Talk
with
to
the
people
cab
on the
driver,
street.
like an Indian cab driver. He would do the whole Indian thing with the guy.
He was unbelievable.
Absolutely brilliant.
So in all those years, and all those people that you brought to radio stations that you promoted, did you ever once get starstruck?
Wow. To be honest with you, Jack, every time.
Every time?
You got to remember, I was just an average guy from, local community who got lucky. Somewhere along the line, I made the right choice, made the right moves, and fulfilled the fantasy that I had in my mind.
I feel exactly the same way. I mean, I was from a little bitty small town. My parents owned a little diner I worked at when I was a kid. I worked at the little 1,000-watt radio station. So I was starstruck. I was a terrible interviewer because I was just like a deer in the headlights every time until I was probably 30 or 35 years old. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I came to the realization, again, I loved music and I loved talent, and I never took the role of, in other words, it wasn't about me. It was totally about them. And it was my honor to be the vocal or the voice of what they were trying to accomplish. So in other words, when you were given their latest single, it was like, what is your expectation of what and obviously every one of them wanted a #1 record.
Right.
So that was my mission in life, was that whatever it took, I was going to represent them in the best way possible, execute their vision. It wasn't to make, I would be nobody. That's the way I looked at it. I would be nobody without them. When you walk into a room and there's Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel and Mariah Carey and Michael Bolton and the list, Eddie Money and Kenny Loggins and Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, you feel pretty small.
You said Eddie Money,
Yes.
and I'll tell you when something changed for me was you brought Eddie Money to the station one time, and Scott was on vacation or something, and I was doing the show. I was leading the show that day, and I think somebody else was out. And it was basically just me and Eddie Money in the studio that day. And when I was talking to him, I finally realized that, these are just people.
Yes.
They may have a lot of talent, but they're really just people. And if you just talk to them like people, and he was wonderful.
He's funny. He was a funny guy. He always had corny jokes.
Yeah, he was just so down to earth. And so I just kind of took, from then on, it's just treat them like they're regular people. I mean, I didn't try to treat them like they were big stars, just treated them normal. And I usually got a good reaction from them that way. Now, saying that, who was the biggest asshole that you ever had to work with?
Oh, I wouldn't use the term asshole. Let's put it more on a.
I had to deal with some of them that were just outrageous. But I will say this. It may have been chemically induced or alcohol induced that they were acting.
Are you going to name names, Jack?
No, I won't name any names.
No, I would say it's not so much an asshole. It's more of the personal relationship or rapport. So in other words, let's say if I was with Billy Joel frequently, and every time I saw Billy, I would introduce myself. And, he'd say,
Mm-hmm.
Jerry, why do you keep introducing yourself? I know who you are. Because
Yeah.
that's how Billy was. He was
Yeah.
relatable. He was, again, going back to like the Eddie Money situation. He was a regular guy. And once you got to see him on a frequent basis, it was like, but I said, he meets a million people. How's he going to remember who I am? But Billy would always say, why do you introduce yourself all the time? I know who you are. On the other hand, George Michael, who I had a tremendous respect for as a talent, but the few times I was with
Difficult.
George, I'd say, George, hey, Jerry Lembo. He'd go, nice to meet you. The next time you met him, Jerry Lembo, he'd go, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
So,
you.
in other words, that's the separation I would make. In other words, there
Right.
were artists who, there were some who were very, very cordial and friendly and had respect. Now, I also learned that management had a big role in that. Managers were very smart. They would coach them. In fact, the funny thing is, Scott used to always say to me, if I was bringing somebody up, I'd have to bring him a cheat sheet, with the names of different people because,
Right.
he wouldn't
Right.
necessarily remember them all. But that's the difference. The managers would sometimes coach him and say, hey, you're going to meet this guy, or this is the person like that. And
Mm-hmm.
if it was rehearsed, it went completely beyond me. It was just the fact that they would say, "Hey, Jerry, how you doing?" Uh, would blow my mind.
Right. Right.
Blow.
And that's the mark of a real professional that does
Yes.
that. So let me. Do you remember a guy when you were at Columbia? And this was in the Billy Joel
Okay.
days. Do you remember an artist that they signed named Mark Gray?
Oof. Mark Gray.
Mark Gray. They were really hot on him.
Okay.
He was he wrote "Kiss You All Over"
Oh.
by
Oh,
Exile.
great
He was in
song.
the band Exile, and he had an album on CBS, and it went nowhere. I just wondered if you did. It was about the same time as Billy Joel. He was married to my cousin.
Oh.
He's from Chattanooga. He's passed away now
Mhm.
too. The business got the best of him as well.
But that was that
Um,
song, "Kiss You All Over." What a classic that was. Man.
yeah, big record. So, you know, the business has changed so
Yes.
much since those days. I mean, you think back, and I mean, if you got a record on Z100 back then, an
Hmm.
ad, you were just about guaranteed a shot at having a hit because so many other stations would add the record and give it airplay, and it got instant exposure to so many people. And of course, at the same time, MTV was red hot at the time, VH1 was getting hot at the time. Today, those three things, are almost gone. Like MTV's pretty much gone, VH1's gone, radio is really diminished because there's so many competitors. YouTube is now VH1, I guess, or you go there if you want to see videos of artists doing their music, and most people are streaming. Um, how hard is it now to get an artist to where you want them to be without the tools that you used to have?
Well, the metrics are totally different. Remember the era we were involved, there was physical product, there was the interaction, there was a very one-on-one interaction. You went to a radio station, you talked to a program director, a music director. You had influence from retail, as you said, and MTV. Today, it's all metrics. It's all analytical. If you can show that you have numbers with TikTok, YouTube, Spotify. That's unlike the days when it was A&R driven, where someone actually went out, saw an act perform, and nurtured the talent. Most artists were signed to multi-album deals, so they had
Mm-hmm.
time to mature and become who they were eventually. Today, it's kind of one and done. You get the metrics, everybody goes there, but do you know how many songs are downloaded every day?
A
Tens of
lot.
thousands of songs. There's no filter. Nobody's A&R
Yeah.
in this, so they go by analytics. And that somehow the system works, but it's so far removed from
Well, how are record companies making money now?
streaming. It's all the money. They own part. Remember, they have interests. There's kind of a coalition between the labels and these systems. They get money from YouTube.
It's like
Yes,
Spotify and
and
all those.
TikTok.
And now I just saw the other day something interesting. There's record promoters that work for the record companies like Jerry was. And then you had this other breed of record promoters called indies.
Yes.
Independent record promoters. We had a big one in Atlanta. I don't know if you remember
Ron
this
Herbert.
guy, but Jimmy Davenport.
Oh, Jimmy. Oh, my God. Legend.
The old bear.
Yeah, legend.
And he controlled Atlanta for a long, long time. And it simply meant that, he got all the coke and hookers and everything for the program directors. And whatever it took, Jimmy controlled the top 40 stations in Atlanta and the ones in Augusta and other places. So if you wanted a record played in that city, you had to go through Jimmy to get it on the air. And I don't care who the local guy was coming up there. There probably wasn't going to be an ad unless it was Neil Diamond or, some big artist like that. Chances are they weren't. But, all that's gone, I thought. And then suddenly I saw the other day somebody suing Spotify because they say Spotify is taking money to push certain artists over other artists on their streaming platform. And I said, that sounds a lot like payola.
It's again, and the difference between, even back then, the difference between the indies, and I'm not discrediting them with their influence. They certainly had a tremendous impact on what records got added. But my approach to it was pretty basic. And again, I came into the business as a sort of a middle-aged married guy with 3 kids, and I wasn't about to become. I wasn't doing drugs or anything like that. I wasn't doing any of the hanky-panky. So my credibility, though, what helped me was the respect I had from the programmers, because I understood their positions. I understood radio. And I would never take a record to a Z100 if I felt this doesn't work. This isn't their sound. It's not what they're doing. And that gave me access and a certain amount of leverage to get records played. So there was...
Well, in most cases, those independent guys never came in the radio station. In all honesty, they simply called and said, I'll meet you later over at Dante's down the hatch, and we'll work this out.
Well, what are you adding? What are you adding this week so I can call it into the label?
Yeah, exactly. And then, or call a bigger independent and turn it in so he could turn it into the label. There was a long line of people taking money. There was a lot of
invoices back then, Jack.
A lot of money going around back then. I'll never forget when. What was the guy out of Philadelphia that was the big indie?
Fred DeCipio?
Fred DeCipio. And Fred would come to these conventions we'd go to, and he had a bodyguard named Big Mike. Not Michelle Obama. I'm talking big, totally different Big Mike. This guy was the biggest human being I've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen Reacher, but in the new Reacher series, he fights this giant guy, and he was about that size. And he would follow him around everywhere. And I would say, why does he need that guy at this convention? What is he afraid of? And they went, he, just personal protection, that's all. And so people would go, he's with the mob, you idiot. And I'd go, the mob? Are you kidding? Yeah, he's with the mob. And I go, come on, you're kidding. And then it was a few years later when, what was the reporter's name from NBC that had that special about payola? Yeah. And he actually had a video of Freddie DeCipio getting out of a car and going through a building and getting into another car with that mobster.
I played the fifth.
Yeah, he got out of the car and got in with him. They did a whole expose on it, and that was what, at that point, most of the big radio companies told the program directors they couldn't work with indies anymore. And the companies, I never understood how this worked. Then the companies started working directly with the indies. I don't know what the difference was exactly. Do you?
I seem to have
I think the difference was, instead of the DJ getting the program director getting all the benefits, the radio station and the ownership got all the benefits.
Well, there was things like if you needed T-shirts or
Right.
things of that nature, or a trip to a contest winner and things of that nature. Yeah, those were pretty basic and fundamental things. I don't know if they met the criteria, of quote payola, but you know,
No, as long as you, there were some rules, and I was a program director for a long time, but you had to, it was called fair value. I think it
yeah,
was called, we gave you a certain amount of promotion and you gave us product
equal
equal
to,
to
yeah.
that dollar
Hmm.
amount was basically the way it worked. So you were talking about earlier priorities, and that's interesting. I remember when I was a program director, even at the smaller markets that I worked at that were getting record service, and there were a lot of them that did, I would get a package every week on like Friday or Monday from Columbia, let's say.
Hmm.
And it'd be like this thick. And you would open it up and it would have, I don't know, 10, 15 singles in
Hmm.
it. And idiot me, I would listen to them all. And I'd go, man, I really like that one, or I think that one's going to work, whatever. And then your rep would call you, and he would only want to talk about three
Yeah.
of them. He'd have one that he'd talk about first, that his important
Hmm.
one. And then he had 2 and 3. The others never had a chance of getting it. In fact, if you played them, they would go, why are you playing that? Don't be playing
Yeah.
that. Play the other one. I said, what do you care? It's your record. I know, but just don't play that. Play the other one. I bet a lot of thought went into that, picking those
Yeah.
priorities, didn't it?
Well, again, I wanted to give every one of those an equal chance of getting played. But again, there was a priority kind of system, and what I would develop was more like I call it staging, if you will. So if there were 4 or 5 different priorities, you had you knew that certain records were going to take the top spot. And then what you do is, I used to equate it to like when you're at the airport and all the planes are lined up on the runway, and that's basically was my system, was to create a runway for each record. And so the priority would get the first spot. You'd have to
Mm-hmm.
estimate how many weeks it would take to get that into from light to medium to power rotation, whatever the case might be, and then you'd
Mm-hmm.
stage the next one, get that set up. Sometimes it would be the influence of other markets. There might be a lot of tertiary markets that were kind of test marketing a certain record that might have been your number 5 priority, and
Right.
suddenly you were seeing some retail activity or phone calls. You were getting, you started to get the request lines were blowing up on a song, and you would adjust accordingly. Uh, Now, of course, each record also had a budget attached to it. If you got to a point where you used all your bank and nothing was happening, then basically it would fall off the priority list.
But a lot of record guys, I know John used to do this in Atlanta, was you had those 3
Mhm.
priorities, but there was always usually some record in that stack that you really liked. And you knew that if you could break that record, it would be a real home run for you with the artist and your
Mhm.
company. Um, like I remember one time John had a record by somebody named Roseanne
Oh
Cash,
yeah.
and it was not a record that Columbia was pushing. It was just she had a record deal, and John got that song played in a lot of places in the South, and
Mhm.
it sort of was a
Yeah,
hit. But
regional hit.
what what's a song that you can think of that you're proud of that you got played that wasn't on your priority
Oof.
list?
It's funny, and this one comes to mind. It was after my Columbia days when I had started my independent company, Jerry Lembo Entertainment Group, and I was getting projects from various labels. And somebody sent me a test pressing of Nora Jones,
Ah,
and I was playing it in my office, and I was totally mesmerized. Now, if you remember, it didn't sound like anything that was on top 40 at the time, but I
no.
just said I just believed in the song. I believed in the artist at the time, and I just said, again, this is where your presentation has to be different. If you came in every week and said this is a hit, this is a hit, I mean that kind of falls flat after a while. I always had to have a story to kind of set a record up. And I said, I'm going to send you this record by Nora.
I bet her story was very sad.
No, it was like, it was more about the aesthetics of the record. And I said, I listen to your radio station all the time. I have it on in the office all day. I said, but at a certain point, I stopped listening. And by that, I mean, everything starts to sound the same.
The same.
So I said, I'm going to send you this song by Norah Jones. It's not going to sound like anything you're playing. And that's the value that this song is going to have on your radio station.
Right. And women love that song.
It stops you in your tracks. You heard the song and you just went, whoa, what was that? And I said, that's the record you need on your radio station right now to stand out and make you different. And I convinced enough people at that point. And I met Norah. I was invited to a promotion party. And they introduced me to her, and they were saying, thank you for all your help and everything like that. And I said to Norah, I said, I can't wait to see you in New York a year from now. And she looked at me quizzically. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, the Grammys are in New York next year. And I can't wait to hear them say, and the Grammy goes to. And I mentioned, and she smiled, looked at her manager and said, oh, that's sweet. And the next year she won 6 Grammy Awards.
Fantastic story.
And then there was Butterfly Kisses by Bob Carlyle. That was another one.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And that was and this Scott was at PLJ at the time. And I said, we're sending a record over from Jive. They're going to messenger it over to the radio station. I said, listen to it right away and then put it on and I'll call you later. So the record gets over there. I guess they had listened to it off the air.
What was that guy's name? Bob
Carlyle.
Bob Carlyle, yeah.
And they listened to it off the air. Scott comes back after a break and he goes, I want you to stop what you're doing. We're going to play this record.
That song is right down his alley.
Of course, he had a daughter.
Yeah, it's right down his alley.
So he puts it on. And after the song ends, it was him and Todd Pettengill. And the song ends and it's dead air. And I go, oh, geez, what happened? I thought my radio went off. Neither one of them could speak. They were like so choked up. And he goes, hey, I remember seeing him later on. He goes, what'd you do to me? I go, I told you. I said, this is one of the songs. And I have 3 daughters. So I go, I know how it hit me. And I knew that it would Scott would have a similar reaction.
See, and that was just a lucky break. That you had that relationship with him for Bob Carlyle to get that song on there, because probably very few programmers would have taken a chance to play a song like that. You had to feel the song was real and have the guts to play it too. There was one time back in I guess this was in the early 90s, and I was back here in North Carolina. I was doing a morning show here, and somebody had sent me, again, I got a package of records or whatever, but there was a single in there that I listened to that was so different than anything else that I had ever heard. And I don't know, it just haunted me. And I played it, and every time I played it, the phones would just blow up, and we were getting emails we were just getting emails, and people, oh, what was that? Where can I get it? And I go, I don't know. It's called Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
Christmas Eve Sarajevo.
Great song.
And, well, nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew what this song was. But I'm telling you, it was one of the biggest songs I ever played on the radio. Right after Thanksgiving, I started playing it. So I talked to Scott all the time, and I called him up and I said, hey, and we would do this occasionally. I said, I've got this song I'm playing, and I've never had a reaction to any song like it. He goes, what is it? And I said, it's called Christmas Eve Sarajevo by Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And he said, well, I don't have it. We don't have it at the station. And I've overnighted it, I guess, a copy of it or whatever. Anyway, he started playing it the next day on PLJ, and it just went boom. Within a week, everybody in America's playing the song, and they've been touring double cities every Christmas since.
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy.
Just a follow up to the Bob Carlyle. was working with Jive at the time, Jack Satter, and I arranged. We had Bob come up to the studio to perform the song live in the studio, and we invited
Mm-hmm.
5 fathers with their daughters to be in the studio with us. Well, if you wanted to see a box of tissues empty in about 30 seconds, Bob's singing the song live. All of us are in tears. I mean, we were all bawling our eyes out. And when the song ends again, I see Scott point to Todd like, "You talk." He couldn't speak. And Todd's pointing at, he was Patty Steele at the time. He's pointing at Patty. "No, you talk." No, but we all lost our composure completely. But it was one of the most moving moments and magical. It's something like that's the magic.
So this long story you're trying to tell me, it's Christmas Shoes by Bob Carlyle is the song you're most proud of getting played that wasn't on your priority list. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, that was a magical song. And, it was one of those songs that, I don't know if you remember this song, but it was a lot like, there was a song we played back in the 70s called Blind Man in the Bleachers.
Oh,
Do you remember
yes,
that?
yes.
And that song's a lot like
Yeah.
it. It was a real tearjerker, and if you didn't feel some emotion, you don't have
Yeah.
any when you heard that song. But it was one of those songs that, like, after it got played for a little while, then people started making fun of it. You know, they were, oh God, you're not going to get out the Christmas shoes, you know.
But you see,
Like you've been
Jack, that's the difference of then and now. You know what happened? That's when there was personality radio. That's when it was
Mhm.
one-to-one communication. It's not like these line of card stations where what do you get, 8 seconds to talk up a song or something, and
Well, not only that, but they're doing, you know, I know guys that are still in the business, and, you know, they're doing afternoon drive on 7 radio stations.
that's nuts.
How can you connect or develop an audience or that relates to that town or that city doing that? You can't. You absolutely can't do it. So you're exactly right. And so where you get those kind of records of those kind of songs now is places like TikTok,
Mhm.
which you know, I doom scroll on there all the time because somebody will come on and go, "Hey, I heard this new song by so and so and made me think of my dad." You know, and
Mhm.
they'll play the song on TikTok or whatever. Same thing, little bitty micro audience that suddenly becomes really big if the song's really good. It's amazing how things have changed.
Mhm.
All right, let me see here. Now you're still involved in the business with your own company. What kind of projects are you working on today?
Well, most of what I do these days, again, it's not so much radio driven anymore. It's more. Again, I've always been a song guy, so my focus really is mostly on songwriters. I look for the creatives. I'm looking for the next Diane Warren, if you will. You
Okay.
know, I'm looking for the next one, hit maker. Um, and it leans more towards the publishing side. And then the other thing is, I still believe on artist development. In other words, you can have a TikTok hit, but a lot of these songs that the labels sign from TikTok, if they don't sustain, like within 3 4 weeks, it's a one shot deal. It's done. It
Right.
doesn't build a career. And there are
Right.
people who still want careers in the business. So what I try to do is just take my collective years of experience and apply that and help people build a business. You know, build a business of music, so that they can, just like I did. I took a chance. I left a job that I didn't have any passion for, and built a business that I had a tremendous passion for. Um, I'm still a student of the game. I created basically, when I started, there was no, today they have curriculums in colleges, you know, for broadcasting and everything. And that didn't exist back then. So I had to create my
Mhm.
own curriculum. And basically, I've just continued being a student of the game. I'm I download every program that I can find that explains what's going on in the business, and try to translate that in a way that someone can develop a career. And
And then, of course, you have to believe, as your sign above your window says
yes,
there behind you. Believe.
that's
Let
from,
me
right?
ask you. Let me ask you a question. What is Jerry Lembo's record promoter extraordinaire of 40 years or whatever? What is your favorite number one top 40 record, CHR record of all time?
Wow.
One record.
One record.
You get to
Oh,
one record you get to pick. That's it.
phew. All right. I'm just going to, because it's Christmas time and she's top of mind, I'm going to go with Mariah Carey, Vision of Love, the first single.
Okay.
I'll have to go with that. Because that was, again, it was a magical time in the business. She was virtually unknown. And that song and obviously everything that followed was extraordinary. And
I just read just a week ago, we had a stat on about her that every year since the song came out,
All I Want for Christmas is making a lot of money.
She makes $2.5–3 million per year just off that one song.
That might even be a conservative number, Jack.
That is crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, my favorite top 40 song all time, Little Red Corvette by Prince.
Yeah.
Love that song.
Did you get to see him perform?
Oh, yeah. I was in, I actually did a morning show at WCCO FM in Minneapolis back in the early 80s.
Wow.
And that was when he was red hot. The movie was out and everything, and he was there. And I saw him at that nightclub in Minneapolis while I was there. One of the most incredible performances I've ever seen by anybody.
Yeah, extraordinary performer. Just
it was unbelievable. Well, Jerry, I have had a blast talking to you, my friends. Great catching up with you. Great stories. Let me just real quick, I promised I would tell you this. Dick Clark once told me he would see to it that I never worked in the business again. So I was doing the morning show down at WSGA in Savannah, and I was making like $300 a week or something. And there was a guy named Jeff McCartney that I knew from I had been doing part-times up in Atlanta at WQXI. And Jeff called me one day and he goes, hey, he said, a friend of mine has a nightclub on Hilton Head and he needs somebody to come over and spin records on the weekend. Would you be interested? And I went, sure, I need the money. He said, this is great. He goes, you get free drinks, free dinner, and they pay you $100. And I said, I'm in, right? You know, it's a third of my pay I'm going to get. So I take the job, and it was great. It was this very fancy club. I mean, really nice dinner club. And they had really top-tier entertainment, and I played records in between. I later found out it was a front for washing money for the mob. That's another story. So anyway, Dick Clark had a show that he was developing for Broadway. And he brought it there, and they bought advertising on our radio station. It was called Dick Clark's Nifty 50s. And he was going to try to make a Broadway show. And it had, I don't remember the groups, but, you know, three of the they weren't the actual groups. They were recreations of some of the 50s doo-wop groups. And so I was going to go over that night. Well, they advertised. Anything was a total sellout. We'd never had a sellout crowd at this club. I mean, it's packed to the rafters. And I'm supposed to go out and introduce the show. And it was one of the few times I had on a suit and tie, and I go out. And right before I'm going out there, Dick Clark, I thought he was a homeless guy backstage. And he grabs me, and I said, Dick Clark. And he goes, nice to meet you. He goes, look, whatever you do, I'm not in this show. He said, it's got my name on it. I'm producing it. I'm going to be up here videotaping it so I can watch it. But I'm not in the show. Make sure people know that. I think people think I'm in the show. So I go, okay. Well, I go out there on the stage, and I introduce myself and say, thank you for coming, all that. And I said, by the way, Dick Clark is the executive producer of this show, but he's not appearing tonight. He's not in the show. Instantly, boo, boo, give us our money back, rip off. I mean, they just went nuts. And I went, and I'm just, you know, kid up there. And I went, But he is with us tonight up in the gallery, right up there, because I thought they were going to start throwing stuff at me. And so he waves, and they were fine after that. They were fine. And the show goes on. Well, I'm leaving the backstage, and all of a sudden he's in my face. And he goes, I told you to say I was not here. And I'll see that you never work in this business again. I never heard from him again or anything happened of it, but it was funny.
You blew your chance of being the next Ryan Seacrest.
Right. Probably did. Well, Jerry, listen, great catching up with you. You look great, my friend.
Thank you, Jack.
You take care of yourself, and thank you for checking out the Jack Murphy podcast today. If you haven't already, look down below, subscribe, like this video, and we're on all the platforms, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, we're everywhere. But check it out. It's the Jack Murphy podcast, and we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great day.
Happy holidays.
Thanks for watching the Jack Murphy Podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Go ahead, ring it. Get alerts when a new episode drops, and tell your friends about the Jack Murphy Podcast. But only the cool friends, please. Tune in next time for another episode of the Jack Murphy Podcast.